The very first time I saw her waddling across that cul-de-sac in her oversized sun hat and holding that clipboard like it was the Constitution, I just knew Brenda Halfston was going to be the kind of neighbor who could turn your Saturday coffee into a courtroom drama. She eyed me with that tight, squint-a look, like I'd run over her begonias, and smiled while doing it. And before I could even say good morning, she was in my face about my ATV, telling me it was a noise violation, a breach of trail policy, and probably a threat to national security if she could make it stick. You know what I mean? There are people in this world who wake up looking for trouble, and Brenda was already halfway through her checklist before sunrise. I took a long, slow sip of my coffee, leaned back against my garage door, and tried the friendly neighbor routine. Brenda, it's not even 8 yet, and it's my one day off. Can we just maybe skip the drama today? But Brenda wasn't having it. She pursed her lips so tight it looked painful, tapped her clipboard like she was summoning backup, and hit me with HOA bylaws like a preacher reading scripture. Article 7, Section 12, Motorized Vehicles Prohibited on Community Trails. Like I hadn't read every page before I signed my mortgage. The only trail she was talking about was the little gravel path behind my backyard, which didn't even belong to the HOA, not officially, not even technically. It was county property, and everyone in the neighborhood knew Brenda and her cronies had been trying to claim it for years, just so they could throw more rules on top of it. I told her as much, pointed right at the trail, and said, "That's public, not HOA. Checked with the county, not once, but twice, Brenda." Her eyes narrowed even more, which I didn't think was possible. She rattled off something about disruptive behavior and residents complaining, but the only complaints I'd ever heard were from neighbors asking if they could take the ATV for a spin themselves. Truth is, Brenda just hated that I had something she couldn't control, and that probably stung more than anything. "I'll be filing a formal violation," she snapped, spinning on her heel like a game show host who just realized she's out of prizes. I just grinned. Good luck with that. Of course, 2 days later, there it was, a bright yellow envelope, violation notice, $300 fine, and a stern warning that further action would follow if I didn't comply. I actually laughed out loud. The thing about Brenda is, she doesn't bluff, but she also doesn't know when to fold. I wandered over to my neighbor Joe's house. Joe's a retired land surveyor, the kind of guy who has every map and plat going back to the dawn of time stashed somewhere in his garage, and when I handed him the violation letter, he just shook his head and chuckled. "She finally went through with it, huh?" he said, and I told him I needed to double-check the county lines, just to be sure. Joe came back with a topographic map, so old the edges were curling. Sure enough, the trail wasn't HOA. In fact, after some digging, we realized the land was technically owned by a trust that had dissolved a couple years earlier, and it was sitting in county limbo, up for private acquisition in some obscure land auction no one had noticed. Except me. A month and a half later, Brenda called an emergency HOA meeting, and I rolled in with my ATV keys in one hand and a county deed in the other. The room was packed, Brenda at the front, righteous fury radiating off her, declaring me a repeat violator and demanding legal action. I let her finish, then stood up, didn't wait to be called on, just did it. Dropped the stack of documents right on the table. "As of last week," I said, "I'm the private owner of the entire trail, the one from my backyard to the lake." You could have heard a pin drop. Brenda's mouth worked silently. Honest to God, she looked like she was about to faint. "Any attempts to fine me for using my own land," I said, smiling so wide it hurt, "will be reported as harassment." Even Joe let out a low whistle from the back row. Well, I'll be damned. I walked out of that meeting feeling like I'd just scored the winning touchdown in the final seconds, my ATV waiting for me, sun just breaking through the trees. But if you thought Brenda was going to take that lying down, you don't know Brenda. Next morning, I found a laminated flyer zip-tied to my mailbox, screaming "Community Safety Alert" in bold red letters, with a list of vague accusations: trespassing, reckless driving, endangerment. No names, but the target was obvious. Half the street had the same flyer flapping in the wind. I caught Joe coming over, dusting off his flannel. "Queen Brenda's making her next chess move," he said. "She's printing lies now. If she keeps this up, she's going to end up in criminal territory," he warned. I told him I'd already installed cameras, one at the trailhead, one at the side gate. If she steps a toe on my land, I'll have it on tape. He nodded, but told me to check with the county clerk again, since Brenda had friends there. I drove straight to the records office after lunch, where Evan, the world's most bored county clerk, pulled up my deed and confirmed nothing had changed. Still registered to you, he said, spinning the monitor so I could see the seal. I asked him to flag the file for shenanigans, just in case. We'll notify you if anyone tries anything, he promised. That made me feel better. For about 12 hours. Because 2 days later, my insurance provider called. Mr. Lally, we've received multiple anonymous reports about safety violations on your property. Unregistered vehicles, hazardous terrain, all requiring inspection. Who filed the report? I asked, already knowing the answer. Anonymous tip portal, she said. Of course. Inspector shows up, clipboard in hand, does his walk. I show him the deed, walk him through the trail, and by the afternoon I get an email. No violations found, case closed. But Brenda wasn't slowing down. The very next morning, there's a new sign hammered right at the trail access behind Brenda's yard. Private HOA property. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. She'd planted it right on my land. So I snapped a photo, called the sheriff's non-emergency line, and 20 minutes later Deputy Richter showed up, built like a linebacker, no nonsense, patient. I walked him out, showed him the sign, handed over my deed. Well, that's a problem, he said, checking the fresh dirt. Can I pull it out? Absolutely, it's your land. He took his own photos, filed an incident report, told me if she tried again, they could issue a citation. Brenda just stood in her yard, arms crossed, glaring like I'd just stolen her prize-winning poodle. I ignored her, but that afternoon I decided it was time to go big. I called up Lyle, a buddy who owns a landscaping company, and cashed in a favor. You still do gravel work? I asked. I need this trail HOA proof. Make it so good, even Brenda can't claim it's unsafe. Lyle laughed. Now that's a challenge. His crew rolled in, and by the end of the first day the trail looked so clean, and even the city could have used it as a sidewalk. That's when things got ugly. Late that night, my phone buzzed, motion on one of the cameras. I opened the feed, saw a figure hunched over, flashlight in hand, sneaking along the trail. 2 minutes later, sparks flew. Someone was trying to sabotage the new border, pry up the edges, or plant nails in the path. I called the sheriff again, and this time Deputy Richter brought backup and a portable floodlight. We found the evidence, fresh damage, a pile of scattered nails, all on video. This isn't just vandalism, Richter said. This is criminal mischief. We'll escalate the report. By sunrise, word was out. Deputies visited Brenda's house, and for the first time the neighborhood started to whisper, not about me, but about her. A petition started floating around, not to kick me out, but to remove Brenda. The HOA president, her old ally, resigned for health reasons, but we all knew better. A special election was called. I didn't run, but Maya did, sharp as a tack, former paralegal, exactly the opposite of Brenda. She won by a landslide. Brenda didn't show up to the next meeting, or the one after that. The trail stayed open, and neighbors started using it more than ever. Still, I wasn't taking chances. Rain rolled in, soft and cold, giving me time to finally organize all my paperwork. That's when I spotted something weird. One sliver of land next to the trail still listed as HOA easement, not ownership, just access rights. And suddenly there was a brand new wrought iron gate across it, padlocked and signed, HOA maintenance access only. No permit filed, county records showed nothing. Illegal as all hell. I grabbed the proof, went to Maya. She'd set up the new board in the old clubhouse storage room, now packed with files and a corkboard covered in sticky notes. When I dropped the documents on her desk, her face got serious. They used HOA funds for this gate, she said, scrolling the expense log. Sure enough, $5,000, no vendor listed, right after Brenda lost power. That's not just shady, Maya said. That's embezzlement. She called an emergency board meeting and scheduled a full audit. That night, I returned to the trail, bolt cutters in hand. Snipped the lock, swung the gate open, rain still coming down in sheets. Brenda came out on her porch, raincoat pulled tight. You're trespassing on HOA property, she called. Nope, I said, waving my map. It's county easement. Your gate's illegal, and I've got the proof. She just stood there in the rain, silent. I left the gate wide open. The emergency meeting was standing room only. Maya at the front, flanked by a forensic accountant. They laid out everything. Unauthorized spending, forged board signatures, funds diverted to a fake LLC under Brenda's name. The whole room gasped. When the vote came to suspend those involved and call for criminal investigation, it was unanimous. Brenda stood, knocking over her chair, shouting about protecting the community, but nobody listened. She left alone, and weeks later, county prosecutors filed charges. Fraud, forgery, obstruction of public access. One morning, deputies escorted her out. No drama, just a quiet end to a long, ridiculous chapter. Maya and the new board rewrote the bylaws, installed three-person oversight for all expenditures, and brought real transparency to the community. I kept the trail in better shape than ever, added a solar lamp near the lake, so at night the water looked like glass. More and more neighbors started using the path. It wasn't just a shortcut anymore. It was a symbol, a story that everyone in the neighborhood now knew, not because someone told it, but because they lived through it. Some mornings I'd be raking gravel or fixing a bench, and Maya would stroll by. "You ever think about running for the board?" she'd ask, and I'd laugh. "I think I've done my part." And that was enough. A few months later, Greg Vance, the former city planner, showed up with a manila envelope. Turns out Brenda and an accomplice had tried one last trick, submitting a fake reclassification request to seize the trail before she was ousted. The county flagged it as fraudulent, but it was the final nail in the coffin. Back in the admin building, Maya and I sat across from the district attorney, laying out all the evidence. Zoning fraud, wire fraud, forgery. The DA didn't hesitate, opening a fresh investigation on the spot. 3 weeks later, Brenda was picked up again, this time facing real charges, and her partner too. During the hearing, the judge made it clear. This was no mistake. This was a deliberate scheme to undermine public trust. Bail denied. The next community meeting, Maya told everyone about the new bylaws, oversight, and the election. Nobody cheered. It wasn't about celebrating, it was just finally closure. Afterward, Joe came over, thermos in hand. "You think we've seen the last of the circus?" he asked. I looked at the trail, the wood chip border, the little bench by the lake. "They thought the trail was just dirt," I said. "But it was the way back to the community they'd lost." Summer rolled in, and the whole place felt different. Kids played hopscotch, retirees walked their dogs, families picnicked by the lake. The trail had become a landmark. Local artists even painted a mural at the head, "Thorns and Sunrise," with a little plaque beneath it. Community is not something you control. It's something you earn. And when people passed by and asked who owned the trail, I'd just smile and say, "It belongs to everyone now." Because that's how it was always supposed to be. So, what do you think? Was it right to fight, to push back, to refuse to be bullied by the rules that weren't even rules, or was Brenda just doing her job? Where's the line between protecting a neighborhood and trying to control it? I'd love to hear how you'd handle it. Drop your thoughts below, share your story. Let's talk about what justice and community really mean.